we're just going to service this tank. We did the filter last time and it looks 1,000 times better than last time I was here. So the test results of this tank is the ammonia is 0, which we're happy with. Nitrite is basically 0. Nitrate is basically 0. pH is nice and alkaline. The KH was only 4. I prefer it higher. And the GH, though we did add some last time, is still basically 0. If you have a very beautiful aquarium, something that I'm very against is very thick lids, because thick lids can be dropped and then they can crack your aquarium. You really want to have thinner glass, because if you do drop the lid, which does happen from time to time, you want the lid to crack. You don't want your aquarium to crack. So I'm always scared of thick glass lids. Now is removing a lot of the decoration. You can put this out in the sun and it will sun bleach back to a nice white. But I'm going to do a big gravel clean here as well. But I'm very scared doing any of this sort of stuff without adding polyfilter, because underneath these sorts of decorations, you can start to form anoxic bacteria, which can discharge hydrogen sulfide, which can be poisonous to the fish if it's disturbed and if you're unlucky. So putting a bit of polyfilter into your filter will remove the hydrogen sulfide in the event that that was actually going to happen. And it is a very good idea, because if you're unlucky, there's a lot of beautiful fish here that would definitely be at risk if that situation was to occur. So if in doubt, add polyfilter. What I'm doing now is a gravel clean. We're getting down underneath where all the rocks were. And considering it hasn't been done for a few months, it's actually not that bad. So if you get a fish that's eating, but it's just not putting on weight, particularly if it gets like a cloudy eye and split fins and so forth, and raggedy scales, it can just be that the fish is old. So generally 4 to 7 years is a pretty standard life for most cichlids, but you definitely do hear stories of them living a lot longer, but definitely some live more than others. But looking at this fella, he is an older fish. One thing I'm very scared of is heaters like this when you've got big fish, because if the fish go 1,000 miles an hour and run into the heater and crash the heater up against the glass and crack the heater, which is potentially not earthed, you can fry all your fish and certainly give yourself a nice electric shock. So I want to make sure the heaters are secured so the fish can't crash into them, because that big fella hitting that at full speed possibly crack the heater. I've had it happen, it's not fun. And I've been electrocuted by it. And especially when you've got large rocks in the aquarium, you don't ever want the large rocks near your heater, because if you drop one of those large rocks or whack it with your gravel cleaner, you really don't ever want to crack your heater, particularly if you're earthed and your hand's in the fish tank. It's not fun. So you've got to be very careful where your heaters are. Now, things like lids, you can give them a good old clean, but if you just soak them in a light acid, then all the calcium and so forth will come off. So like a citric acid or something, you can soak them in, and that will usually bring the glass back up really clean. Now this tank at the moment is running a very low GH, so I've added more African GH. The African GH is going to really help the immune system of the fish, help their body slime, and basically help their overall health and help to make them more resistant against disease. Now the pH of this tank is quite stable, but this product here is going to help the alkalinity and pH. So this is going to help raise our KH and pH, but I've got a feeling that this tank will probably sit around 4 where it's at. So if we just start monitoring the KH and we find that the tank just sits around 4, then we could consider leaving it that way. Otherwise, that product there should raise the pH and KH. Now the other thing is that whenever we do something major like this, because we've removed rocks and all sorts of things, then I really like to make sure that we have some white spot cure on hand. So if we saw itching and scratching and flicking and swimming on the spot, if we saw those sorts of behaviors in our fish, then we want to try and treat them for white spot as fast as possible, because the faster you treat the white spot, the more effective it will be. So particularly in winter, like it is here now, it's white spot season, and it's just like the fish catching a cold. So just like we've done a water change and we're going to put cold water in now, what we don't want is for the fish to catch a cold. So if we saw any of this behavior, little white spots on the fish, or we saw itching, scratching, swimming on the spot, breathing heavy, we'd want to dose that. Now for this tank, we put half of this in, and then we would repeat the dose the next day, and then we would want to actually get more, because in a perfect world, actually it's a half dose, so this would do the tank perfectly. So we would half of it in the first day. The day after we'd put half of what's left, and the day after that we'd put the last bit in. And then that would be a full course of the white spot, because this is definitely a risk this time of year, and it's definitely a risk after doing something major with the aquarium. The other thing too that I really like to do is to add polyfilter, but you never ever add polyfilter if you're adding white spot medication, because the polyfilter will remove any medication. So the reason why I like adding the polyfilter is because after moving rocks and so forth, there is a risk of hydrogen sulfide. And if you're very, very unlucky, then you can get hydrogen sulfide, and that can actually kill your fish. So at this stage, they seem okay. But once again, it's really a matter of having the stuff available so you can use it if you see a problem. Because problems always occur when you're not in a position to fix it. Now, fish keeping and the quality of your fish is 50% water quality. So we can test your water and check on that. And it is 50% nutrients. So my absolute favorite foods is Danichi's color. And I find that the color and fins and luster and scales and just general health of the fish, no matter what the fish, is unparalleled with this particular food. And then I find this one is the cleanest. So Spectrum's probiotic, it's got the probiotic bacteria in it, which means when the fish poo, the bacteria in the poo eats the poo. And once again, I will regularly go to people's houses for a consultation, and then all the fish look okay, and I test the water and the water's terrible, and then sure enough, they've got good quality food in the cupboard. I can go to the very next house and all the fish are dying, and I can test the water and it's nowhere near as bad as the last house, but then I check the cupboard and there's processed crap food. So I really believe that half of fish keeping is the food that you choose. It's what makes your fish colourful, and it's what makes your fish healthy, regardless of everything else. So there's no point having great water quality, there's no point having great filtration if you don't have good food. At the moment, is you can see the water flowing over the top of this weir, and we've actually put the heaters into this section here. So the heaters are now in there, and that looks much nicer, and it means that the fish can't crash into the heaters, particularly as the fish get older. So I'm very happy with that.